the great storytellers of generations past looked upon the grim dawn that would one day threaten their very profession. For this was a writer with no other needs, a writer that could compose hours of reading in mere minutes. And this is that very writer. Today we're going to be writing a Zelda. We're going to be attempting to write a Zelda creepypasta with an AI, and I have a feeling it's going to go so well. A quick explanation on how this works. I pretty much type in a prompt here, give it, a paragraph or whatever, and then I ask it for a paragraph, and then I'm hoping we can kind of play off of one another and see if this ends up being okay? Anyway, let's get started. I was a guard of the royal family of Hyrule, but now I'm a prisoner in the very cells I was once tasked with guarding. After seeing the horrors that happen here, I know I'm doomed. Starvation would be a relatively quick and painless death. The screams of the other inmates can be heard deep into the night. Really, they are more like playthings for the most twisted minds of Hyrule.
My only chance of escaping is to find the young Princess Zelda and kill the King of Hyrule. The king's guards would never leave her and the princess would never let a man get close to her. One good thing I found out while here was I can actually swim. It's more of a twist in the story to help the princess survive.
What have I gotten myself into? These are some of the insane ramblings I would hear from past prisoners. Now I found myself reciting them as well. The faintest glimmer of hope in this twisted facility, where even the king would never tread. I was snapped out of my haze by a loud thunk, by pleading and a feeble attempt to struggle. Dared not look up as they dragged the man next to me out of a cell and down the hall. They took him down the left hall.
I fought to keep myself awake as I awaited my fate. They had to be planning something. My only chance at freedom was right there in front of me, if I could find it. My eyes were strained from my awkward position and my hands were shaking from the strain of holding myself up. Suddenly I felt a cold metal cage clamp down on my neck. It shocked me, but I kept my eyes on the door that would bring me back to my confinement.
I always used to joke that my job, if you could even call it that, was my confinement. How cruel and ironic life can be when you speak up against the king. Now I find myself in the very treatment that I was hoping to be rid of. I now know that this place isn't meant for the worst evils of Hyrule like I thought, but only for those that oppose the royal family. Another loud clunk. This time they took a child, no older than 15. I strained to keep my head down and not attempt to stop them. Rule number 1 down here. Stay silent. He was dragged down the left hall.
Finally, after what seemed like forever, they took a young man out of his cell. I can barely feel the cage on my neck as I turned my head to see a man, dressed in white and red. He could not have been much older than my late teens, which was surprising to see him come out of a cell. He was tall and lanky, with wild blonde hair, did not struggle with his arms limply by his sides as they dragged him down the left hall. After a few moments I started to move my hands. I'm no dummy, I knew I would be shackled down here. I just hoped that my information would somehow reach the queen's ears and help me. Another insane rambling. Hyrule has no queen. After what seemed like an eternity, they took out a prisoner who happened to be blindfolded. I craned my neck to see where he was going, but he was nowhere in sight.
That poor bastard was taken down the right hall. Even I have no idea what's down there. We never hear anything from down the right hall, and guards are barred from entering. We were to leave prisoners shackled to a rusted metal door and leave immediately. We were often warned not to look back. Now I really wish that I had held on to that piece of advice. After some time, I was alone in the prison. An eerie silence took hold as the screams stopped. I wasn't sure if it was true silence or some defense mechanism my body had finally gifted me. I began to drift into a surreal comfort in my familiar environment, but then I began thinking of the poor souls that I had damned with my actions in this cursed place. I sat there motionless for some time. Eventually, the silence was broken with a whisper. Here lies Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. My eyes shot open, but no one was there.
All of a sudden the door flung open with a loud bang. I jumped in my seat and with my heart beating out of my chest I looked over to see who had just come in. There stood an older woman, nearly her late 40s, with silver hair and an odd look on her face. She was adorned with a familiar yet twisted garb. It almost looked like something Princess Zelda would wear. I could not quite figure it out, but it did look like she was holding some sort of whip. She stood there alone silently, but her presence said all it needed to. My heart sank. You should know Hyrule does have a queen.